What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, you know, we all have this chat here in the United States about the Super Bowl. We might be talking about what Rihanna did in her halftime show, but we're not this type of show. We are talking about what's going on in Paraguay. A lot has been going on in terms of changes from a league perspective, from a national team perspective, and what's looking ahead. So we'll definitely mention what's been going on there and what's to come, as well as, you know, we have obviously a new manager at Cerro Porteño, as we spoke last week about the sacking of Chiqui Arson. Now comes in a new name, a name that not a lot of people had it in mind on their radar. We're going to see what kind of expectations are given to him and his new team. We'll talk about what's been going on with the Copa Libertadores, with one team making a miraculous qualification to the next round of the Copa Libertadores, and talk about failures from one national team to hopefully expectations for another national team. We won't say who, we will mention it later as we talk. So let's go straight into the motherland, as I always like to say, to Fede Perez. It's been a busy week, I'd say, in Paraguay, typical Paraguayan drama, but also a bit of excitement as well of what's to come.
Yeah, especially in that Nacional match, right, Roberto? The one that you were talking about, the first Libertadores game that we were all watching. We were all waiting to see if Nacional could turn it around after losing in the first match in Peru, and they did it in that second half. We definitely got to talk about everything that happened there, because it looked like it could have gotten suspended. Also, it was a huge thunderstorm, a huge storm that night, so it was a problem for the game also. And yeah, as for the local league, I'm still waiting. There's rumors going around of certain teams, big teams, making last minute moves on the market. It's still open. I believe they can make transfers still up to February 24th. So maybe we see this transfer window still kind of open. There are rumors going around that Olivia might make a couple of signings. Cerro Porteño has never brought a center back to put back there for Alexis Duarte, so they definitely got to look into something, and they are not the only teams that are still signing. So yeah, we definitely got to talk about everything that's going on in the local league as we head into week number 4 this week of the Apertura. Certain teams are kind of obligated also, right, to get that first W, that first win in this tournament. Certain teams have looked really good, like Luqueño, Guarani, going up against the big teams but they haven't won yet, and they're traditional teams, so their fans are kind of waiting for that big first W. We'll see if they get it on this week for that, and much to come in this week in Guarani Vision, Roberto.
100%, Fede. Let's go straight into Miami, where, you know, here we are, another week of what's been going on in Paraguay. And, you know, we were talking off the air, and this is not what we had in mind, obviously, of what we're going to speak about. But again, we saw some drama today. This is something that actually is not really spoken about a lot in just general Paraguay media, but we saw last night a huge clash between two teams from the Presidente Franco region of in Paraguay for futsal. A game between Presidente Franco and Paranaense have riots and fights between rival fans in futsal more than anything, and that's kind of been something that, you know, not a lot of people speak about, Ralph, but I think you and Fede have spoken about kind of this violence that is unfortunately very typical of what's going on in Paraguay.
Yeah, you do see it occasionally. Hi, everybody. Yeah, you see this occasionally in futsal, and also in the regional tournaments, which obviously aren't televised or anything like that, but people are very passionate. You get sometimes the kind of city rivalries. You get really big crowds. I think we have mentioned this before, that football and futsal in the countryside, it's hugely popular. In Paraguay, lots of people at the weekends, they go back to their roots and they leave the city. And those tournaments, you can get crowds in the hundreds, maybe even to 1,000. So it's funny because sometimes you watch Primera games and there's not like that big attendances outside of the major teams, but the guys are all in the countryside watching the local football. It gets very, very big, very passionate, and sometimes it does overspill. I mean, one of the issues Paraguay has, of course, with policing is that the police is it's a very centralized country. So anything outside of Asunción is not as secure as maybe it would be in the capital. So you do get these things happening, which is, of course, a shame to see. And well, it's something they have to keep working on. I mean, futsal in Paraguay is big. Paraguay are a very good futsal team nationally. They they won a lot of world championships, not the FIFA futsal, but the other type of futsal. Now they're trying to move into FIFA futsal in terms of competing better. And a lot of the games are televised. I mean, a lot of there's a national futsal league, and that's televised. And so it's a big sport for Paraguayans. But yeah, there's definitely some things to keep improving in that respect.
100%. I think it's, something that I think, like I said, definitely needs to get a bit more attention, not just because of how good some of the teams could be, but also just some of the violence that unfortunately continued during that part of the country. But we'll switch gears as to what's been really going on in Cerro Porteño. Obviously, we saw some news actually break literally the day of recording that we did last week. We were always talking about who could be a successor for Chiqui Arce, who had left Cerro Porteño as their manager. And right when the announcement happened, like a couple hours after we record, we get the announcement. It's going to be Facundo Sava, the 48-year-old Argentine who had previously managed at Patronato, actually a Patronato side that ended up winning the Copa Argentina. They didn't save themselves from relegation though, but he's had experience managing clubs in Chile. He's had experience managing teams in Argentina with the likes of Racing, Quilmes, Tigres, Gimnasia, teams in Chile like O'Higgins, Unión de Santa Fe. So he's got the experience as a manager in the last 10 years working for clubs in Chile and Argentina. Now goes into a Cerro Porteño side. And I want to go to Fede on this one, because certainly, like I said in the beginning, it's a name that maybe not a lot of people had thought. We had spoken about rumors of managers of bigger names per se, that had been rumored around, but here comes a manager who obviously is not an unknown to at least those in Argentina because of what he's been able to achieve, but still it's quite a big jump from going from a side that was fighting relegation to going to one of the biggest teams in a country like Paraguay. So this is an interesting move, and I like your thoughts on how you view it, and especially speaking to those who are involved in Cerro Porteño.
Yeah, it's a huge move for Facundo Sava in his career, actually, right? Going to a huge team outside of his country. It's a big opportunity for him. It was definitely not the number one candidate for the fans. It was. I don't think it was what we as journalists were waiting to see from Cerro Porteño, but you were waiting maybe for an Argentinian coach, just because that's what the front office has brought many times before to Cerro Porteño. So yeah, they went back to Argentina to find a good one, and I think they found an average good coach. We'll see how he fits the job, how long it will take him to get this team straight. Also, he definitely is going to come with his way of working, and that's going to take a while to adjust. I mean, Chiqui Arce has been there for a while, so for the players to change the way that they played, the way that they probably have played these last couple of seasons, it's not going to be easy. You could see it the other day, right? When Diego Gavilan took the job for just one game and he tried to change up things a bit, and the team did not look good at all in that first half, right? And they ended up just tying it in the second half. So they had trouble, they had problems again, even without Chiqui Arce. So Facundo Sava was already watching it there from the stands, just seeing what he has, and he's going to take on the team for this first game. They're not going to play at home. They're going to play on the countryside. They're going to Villarrica to play Guaireña. That's going to be really nice to see. A lot of people in the stands, a lot of fans that don't usually get to see Cerro Porteño are going to be there. And I think that's good for them, take that trip, get on the bus, get everybody together, take as many hours as they can to talk and try to get this team together again. Cerro Porteño has to win. Cerro Porteño has to get on the winning streak. And I like this coach. I mean, he got his opportunity back. I remember in Racing, right? That was probably the biggest team he had the chance to manage. It wasn't that good in the results, but he had a Paraguayan there. I remember it was the first games of Oscar Romero when Facundo Sava took on that team. So he knows his way around the Paraguayans, or at least he had one there. And in Patronato, he did an okay job. I mean, you weren't waiting for that team to save themselves from relegation. That was actually something that they were pretty much destined to do. But his surprises came in that Copa Argentina that you mentioned, where they played Boca, they played River, and they did a great job from the strategy point of view. So I'm waiting to see what kind of coach we're gonna get out of this guy. He has a title in psychology. Also, a lot of people are talking about that he's gonna have his way to get to the players, that he might even bring yoga to the practices. He actually put his players in Patronato to do yoga. So I don't know, maybe Cerro Porteño kind of need that right now, just to kind of get that stress out of them, that pressure. Cerro is a team that's always under that pressure, especially when the Libertadores comes around, and that's really close by, Roberto. So I want to see if this team can get it together and together fast, Ralph. That's the big task for Facundo Sava, to get it off fast and to put the fans by his side really quickly on this new job that he has.
That's exactly right, Fede. I mean, is everything's happening. They have the trip. We're recording on Thursday. They have the trip tomorrow, Friday, to Guarani to play them. And then next week is the Copa Libertadores. And we're in the kind of knockouts. It's preliminary rounds, but it's knockout, right? It's 2 legs. So he can't really afford to start slowly. It's definitely, I think, in a way, it's the biggest team he's taken over. I mean, Racing, of course, is a very big club in Argentina. But when he did take them over, I think it was his first job, and it was maybe a different situation. Since then, he's been going around, let's say, middling teams and trying to lift them up. So now it's very different to come from, let's say, a Patronato and a Quilmes, which were the 2 most recent jobs, to Cerro, who expect titles. So I think for him, it's going to be a change as well. Obviously, as you mentioned, for the players, it's a big change now, because Chiqui Arce had his base and he had his set players that pretty much were playing most games. Even when they might not perform that well, he would keep them in because he had a lot of trust in them. Now everybody has to start almost afresh and work new. And let's see, I mean, who he goes with, who he likes, who he doesn't like. I think we'll see very early on. Maybe there's still a bit of time in the transfer window, so maybe he gets rid of some people. We know he's apparently asked for a centre back from Gimnasia, so he's looking for a player already to fill that spot, which is an important point, because Cerro have played 3 different players at centre back so far, right? Patiño's been the one that's always there, but then they've tried Quintana, they've tried Del Valle, they even put Pirista Mota there in one game. So they're still experimenting, and he's going to have to quickly put down, end those experiments and get that team together, because he needs results. So it's a big challenge. One thing I did notice as well, which was interesting, is even at Patronato and Quilmes, who maybe aren't such attacking sides, or you wouldn't expect them to score so many goals, he was always averaging about 1.5 goals a game. So that's pretty decent for that kind of team. That maybe gives us a little bit of an idea of his philosophy as well. He was a striker, of course, as a player. In England, most people remember him because at Fulham, he used to carry a mask in his sock. And if he scored a goal, he'd take the mask off and put it on. Yeah, he's very well remembered in the Premier League for that celebration. And so him, a striker himself, he seems to have some of that attacking philosophy, which is what Cerro need as well, because a lot of what's happened recently, okay, the defense isn't great, but also they haven't been able to score that second goal to get a win. They've been scoring 1 goal per game. They need to try and get 2 to win games, because they can't rely on clean sheets every single match. So interesting times for Cerro.
Definitely interesting times. I mean, certainly at the way of they're looking in the league as well, they were able to snatch a draw against Guarani on the weekend. And, they're one of the remaining 4 teams to have not lost a single game yet after 3 games. Obviously, Olimpia Nacional still have to play 1 more extra game, but with them, Libertad, Olimpia Nacional, and Cerro Porteño, they are the 4 remaining teams. But you're right, Ralph. They can't afford to lose, and certainly this sacking doesn't come in at a great time, especially like you said, with another game on the weekend, and then obviously Copa Libertadores starting, which has kind of been their main objective, really, to perform well and to see what goes from there. But Fede, I mean, I want to go to you to close it out. I mean, and just looking at how we assess this as a whole, I mean, he can't fail right at the first hurdle. I mean, yeah, you want your change, and I think any new manager that comes in, you get like this thing called a new manager bounce, where you come in, team is motivated, team plays differently than what you've been opposed to. You wouldn't expect anything different, at least from what you're seeing from the Cerro Porteño side. Certainly now with this new manager, there is that change of philosophy. Could it happen right there and there? I don't know, but certainly they have to do much better than what they've done in their last 3 games.
he's only going to have about a week really to work on this team, to be honest, right before this Libertadores match. So I don't think he's going to change it up that much. I do think he might give other players an opportunity, more game time, maybe for players that were kind of relegated, that were sitting down on the bench, maybe. As for strikers, I mean, he has all the formulas available. I mean, Sergio Diaz is back. We got Morales scoring now. Diego Turin is looking better as the games go by. He's getting in shape. He's getting in form. Marcelo Moreno Martins is the only one that I think is not competing yet. Fernando Fernandez was out last game, but he was the starter for Chiqui Arce. So the competition is going to be there for the strikers, I believe. But he's going to have to solve the situation in defense, just like Ralph was saying. They changed it up way too much there, and especially midfield. I mean, I'm not seeing the best levels from Pica Lucena yet. I'm not seeing the best from Claudio Aquino. The team is depending way too much from him. Carrizo hasn't come in that much yet to play for Cerro this season. So he needs to get that creative side also working so the strikers can get as many opportunities as they need to be a good team. Obviously, if Cerro starts winning, if they get on a winning streak, if they start feeling better, if the results quickly come, the atmosphere is going to change. The beginning of the season was not pretty for Cerro Porteño, but it can really quickly turn around if they can get a couple of wins. They're going to play in Villarrica now, so with this away game and with the Libertadores match, I think they can really turn it up in just 2 games, Roberto. And after that, it could be a cruise for Facundo Sava, or it could be a nightmare if he doesn't get those results.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's got like 3 key question marks, right? One is the central defender to partner Patiño. One is what to do with Carrizo and Aquino, because we spoke a lot about this last year. When they were on the pitch together, they weren't actually as productive. But the problem is they're both very good players, so you have to maybe choose one over the other. And then it's the striking combinations. I mean, if it was me personally, I'd always have Morales starting, because I think of the strikers we're talking about, Morales is probably the most complete in terms of he's mobile, he can finish, he can pull off wide, he can play down the middle. So it's good to have him in your team because he has more versatility. But then it's who do you put with him? I mean, between Turin, Fernandez, Moreno, it's almost a toss-up at the moment because none of them are really showing very much. So that's maybe the big question for him. And then maybe that's where the psychology comes in. Maybe he looks at them, because you look at someone like Moreno Martins and you kind of think he has all the talent, but he doesn't have the goals. Really, since coming to Cerro, it's never quite clicked for him. He's never got into a good run of goals. He's scored a few in important moments, but he's never had a good run of scoring. And so maybe is that a psychological thing that if he can get it to click, then Cerro have a international class striker playing for them. So that might be one of the big challenges. But yeah, those are the 3 question marks, I think. Defense, the Carrizo Aquino, and then who to play as a strike partner with Morales.
We'll definitely see what happens to Cerro Porteño as they tackle in this new journey with Facundo Sava. As we switch gears to a game that we saw over the last few days as well, the miraculous win from Nacional, playing in the Defensores del Chaco, coming from a 2-1 loss to Sport Huancayo of Peru, now going back to Asunción, and things were looking very bad for Nacional. Huancayo scored early on in the 39th minute, but then 3 goals coming all in the second half. 2 goals actually happening in 7 minutes. Goals from Cristian Ocampos in the 62nd minute, Matias Martinez in the 69th minute, and in the last minute, when everyone was thinking this game was going to penalties, here comes David Fleitas. And Ralph, I mean, what a miraculous win for Nacional. What a miraculous win for Pedro Sarabia's team as a whole, and in his kind of, in a way, I mean, kind of really saves his job per se. So no, this is a really, really big result for Nacional. Now they take on another Peruvian side, ironically enough, in Sporting Cristal. But I mean, if I'm Nacional and I'm looking at how the team has been performing, I am very motivated.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a miraculous win because they didn't play very well. I mean, they shouldn't have needed a miracle in a way, right? You should be beating Sport Huancayo at home, I think fairly comfortably. But when the game was strange because there was a torrential downpour. It was raining so much. There's one video that the Libertadores Twitter account put up where I think they hadn't properly done the backing sound, so all you hear is just rain, like pouring down. It's a really fun video. So it was a strange situation, and of course Huancayo take the lead with a very good free kick, which sometimes maybe you're not almost expecting in a way, and it put them on the back foot because suddenly they needed to score 3 goals to avoid penalties. And as the game was wearing on, you couldn't really see where it was going to come from. There wasn't much of a spark. But one thing about Nacional, but also about Peruvian teams in the Libertadores do have a habit of crumbling when things go against them. This wouldn't be the first time. They have a really bad record at the moment in the Copa Libertadores as a federation. And so by getting that first goal, I think that was just so key. And then you see Matias Martinez is a player that I think Sarabia has done really well to kind of find and use properly. And he's playing very well since they've lost so many players. So many players have left the club. And that's a really excellent goal. And suddenly it puts them in at least the driving seat in terms of they're taking it back to penalties. But yeah, they didn't give up. They don't give up. And then at the very end, you see some kind of a combination of some poor defending, and David Fleitas gets in there, who was also a substitute that Sarabia brought on, that manages to find that winner. And in a way, that was a exact reversal of what happened in the first leg. If you guys remember, in the first leg, it was Huancayo that scored right at the very end, which had maybe made things a bit more difficult than it should have been for Nacional. But yeah, they didn't play well until those final 20, 25 minutes. But look at them. They've won both their games in the league. They're through to the next round. I mean, and they're doing all of this without Bruera, who went to Olimpia, without Rua, who went to Argentina, without Prieto, who's injured, without Danilo Santa Cruz, who is in a very strange situation because he can't sign, it seems, for any club because he's reportedly signed for more than one club, but he's not able to play for Nacional. So, I mean, he's doing a really good job on that basis, and they're grinding out the results. Next up is Cristal. Interestingly, they'd never beaten a Peruvian side before. This was their first win against a Peruvian team. So Cristal is going to be a much different opposition. They don't have to go to altitude, but it's a team that plays a lot better with the ball and has possession. So it will be a different type of game. But I think actually it will suit Sarabia's style a bit more, actually, to have a team that prefers to have the ball, at least for that first trip to Lima next week.
Yeah, I hope Sporting Cristal brings a couple more people to the stands also. I mean, in that first game, we saw pretty much nobody in Peru in the stands. And in the second game, when they had to play in Defensores del Chaco, it was kind of hard for Nacional's fans because of the rain and the storm that headed this way right before the match. And it was a problem for that second half. And it really was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be for Nacional. I mean, lately, when you see a draw like this in Sudamericana, in Libertadores, and you see a Paraguayan team go up against a Chilean team or a team from Peru, you're always thinking that you can get around these teams because they haven't done well, really, in the continental tournaments lately. So I'm really happy for Nacional that they were able to pull it off. Really happy for Pedro Sarabia, a national coach that's really showing his stuff. He did a great job last year, and he's starting again really well this year. It felt like luck was not going to be on their side, really, just the way the game started and just the way things had gone in Peru. They had to deal with altitude and they had to deal with the storm, but I think maybe it worked to their advantage, that the CONMEBOL officials said, okay, let's wait a little bit longer to start that second half. They were able to get their stuff together, get the players motivated, and to show that they have leaders in that locker room, right? I really liked what I saw from defender Carlos Rolon. Actually, he played for Cerro before, for Olimpia. So he's got to show his stuff now in Nacional. He's already made a name for himself, but he's got the starting role. He's got to be that leader in that defense, and they got to try to build that new locker room. They got to build that new chemistry between them, right? And you see a kid like Matias Martinez. Well, maybe not such a kid. He's 28 years old now, but taking on an important role in the team after just what Ralph mentioned. Those playmakers left: Carlos Arrua, Danilo Santa Cruz. Most of the offense went through those guys, and now Matias Martinez is kind of taking over. A couple of new names also as they wait for Richard Prieto to come back from injury. They don't have that much stuff in midfield, but they do have strikers that are really young. Cristian Ocampo scored again. He's only 23. And then you see David Fleitas and Gustavo Aguilar coming in. And if you got those players all together, I mean, they're going to be very good and strong in the air, and I think they took advantage of that in those last minutes and with those long balls. So Nacional, as the games go by, I think you're going to see better. You're going to see this team get better and better just because they have a good coach and the way he's working. They might do something special. They did something special against Huancayo, and we'll see just how much fuel they got on them if they can keep on going in this Libertadores, or at least now the Sudamericana is a possibility, Roberto.
Yes, it is. It definitely is a possibility. They could still make it depending on what they do in the next stage of the Libertadores as well. That they could make it if they do qualify. Also, a special mention as well to Cerro Porteño. I forgot they will also be playing the Libertadores. They'll be traveling to Chile to take on Cursillo Unido. Obviously, a big one for Cerro Porteño and their chances of qualifying either further to the Libertadores or to the Sudamericana. Just really quickly, I mean, you would think Cerro Porteño have the opportunity to take on a Cursillo Unido side, that maybe isn't exactly the best on paper, but I'd fancy Cerro on this one. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, it's like we were just talking with Sava. I mean, he has so little time to really do something with it. So you feel on paper, definitely they should win. I mean, they are a stronger team, but they're in a very complicated situation. I would say it's probably the most difficult situation they're in, that they have to travel this week to Villarrica, then they go back to Asunción for the game, and I mean, then they have to travel for the game. So I mean, it's not ideal, but yeah, on paper they should do it. Maybe what we'll see is a draw or a 1-goal defeat, even away, because it's a bit tough, and it's this very new team that Sava's taking on.
With the new coach coming in, I mean, I don't think he's going to be thinking much about that second game, right? I don't think he's going to be thinking about the Libertadores game yet. I think he wants to see a starting team on this first game against Guarani. So he's not going to save up players, save the energy for the Libertadores match. That could be problem for Cerro. I mean, they could be tired for that game against the Chilean side that are only thinking about that Libertadores match against Cerro Porteño ever since they saw that draw. And they respect Cerro Porteño. So I want to see just the way the Chileans are going to play this game. If they're going to try to already put the score on their side at home, or they're going to try to wait and see what happens in Paraguay. I think they're going to be cautious about it. I think they're going to respect the bigger team in this leg, which is Cerro Porteño. And I think they're going to hold it back there. They're going to close the spaces up, especially just the way Cerro Porteño plays. They like to have the ball. And I think that Chilean side are going to look at the videos. They're going to look at how Cerro Porteño plays, and they're going to play as the smaller team, maybe. But I think it's all going to be as just how Facundo Sava, the new coach, handles the situation, how he manages the team, and just how he solves the problems that he's going to get in these two games against this Chilean side. I mean, this is an unknown team for the Paraguayan fans. I mean, if you talk to Cerro Porteño fans, I mean, they're favorites. They want nothing to do with leaving the Libertadores this fast. So they gotta do it, Roberto. They gotta make it happen any way possible.
100%. They can't fail. They need to go straight from the get-go to get the results that they need and go from there, really. I mean, there's nothing more you could ask for from Facundo Sava and from the Cerro Porteño side. Switching gears to what actually has been going on since we last recorded, we did talk about the U20 championships happening in Colombia, and we were hoping that Paraguay, after a great start to the tournament where they were able to snatch results against Colombia, Argentina, Paraguay, they have fell really flat on their face over the last few weeks, failing to qualify to the U20 World Cup, losing every game besides Venezuela, not winning a single game, but drawing Venezuela, losing 3-0 to Colombia, losing 2-0 to Brazil, losing 1-0 to Uruguay, and probably the most painful of them all against an Ecuador side who had only won. What this win was their one win in the entire tournament, and they're going to the U20 World Cup. Besides us, I mean, Fede, what a complete embarrassment, really, from Aldo Bobadilla and this side that had so much expectation. But at the same time, it was coming. You saw some of the results that were coming in from the last few games, even from the games that we saw in the group stage. You saw that this was coming. And, again, another failure for Robert Harrison and his administration to not qualify to another World Cup. It's now going to be over 10 years since Paraguay have qualified for a U20 World Cup, which is huge. It's a huge thing, and we're not going to go too deep into this because we can go hours and hours about how badly Paraguay have performed in previous tournaments to qualify, but this does not look good for the administration of Robert Harrison, especially given the fact that he's been reelected as well.
Yeah, after the first games, you thought that this team was ready to compete, at least to fight for an option to go to the World Cup, and unfortunately they kind of melted down really on those last games. I mean, they couldn't score. It was frustration after frustration. The goalkeeper from the other team was pretty much stopping everything, and the ball just didn't want to go in. Besides not playing very well, besides not having a balance maybe on the game itself, and maybe not taking too many risks, which was something that we were talking about, just the way that the coach was managing this team. And then you saw that you had players that were tired, and the ones that were coming in weren't the same quality. You didn't have the same replacements for them. You had trouble, maybe even with the list that you came up with, and looking at it from the coach side of you, just because you mentioned Aldo Bobadilla, who's going to stay at the job. Apparently, he's still going to manage the under-17 Sudamericano that's coming up in just a couple of months. A lot of people were thinking that he's going to come back from Colombia and he's going to resign. He's going to leave the spot. That didn't end up happening. He talked to the press and he said, "I'm stronger than ever. We couldn't do this, but we're going to try to do it with the under-17." He's been working on this process with both of these teams, with the under-17 and the under-20. But yeah, it's another failure, to be honest, from the same administration. They're the ones that are picking this coach. They're the ones that are picking the way that the team is supposed to play, also the style of playing, and they're clearly not choosing the right ones. And that happened on the national team, on the senior national team, and that's happened also on these youth leagues. And it probably has to do a lot with the way that the clubs themselves work with the young kids. That's why we have these kind of players. We saw Mati Segovia, one of our stars, and he was very fragile. And that's the kind of player that you see here in Paraguay, probably just misfed in their first years in their lives, and other stuff. Just the kind of the time that they could put into football, into their training. Those are just two of the many issues that we have here in Paraguay, and that players have to go through in the process of growing into being a professional football player. So we're still, I think, in a long way of working the right ways. You can see it in Brazil, you can see it in Uruguay, you can see it in other teams in the Sudamericano. They are far away from us in the way that they're playing, the way that they're working. And we can sit here and talk about all the excuses that we can make up, Ralph, but it just looked ugly, and they just couldn't resolve it. And then you saw one of those last images, one of our star players, Martinez, fighting there with the coach, so he wouldn't take him out. I mean, everything was just bad at that moment. I mean, just the way it ended, it's just, we didn't do much at that game against Ecuador either.
Yeah, it was a sad way to end, considering we got through the group, which was arguably harder than the second group, but we weren't able to get the results against Venezuela and Ecuador, which is basically what we needed to qualify, because we didn't have to beat Brazil, we didn't have to beat Uruguay. We just needed to beat those two to get through. One thing that Aldo Bobadilla said, and it's something I was kind of noticing too, is he mentioned the altitude of Bogota, What I noticed was definitely there was a drop, gradual drop in the physical intensity from Paraguay, and that goes to some of what Fede is saying about the preparation of the players. Even to the point that we have players injured, right? Diego Gomez gets injured very early on. Segovia is injured halfway through the tournament and then comes back. And so where in the US, for example, in US soccer, I think there's maybe an over emphasis on athleticism is very popular here and not as much on technical football. And so that's a big problem the US has been trying to work through with their youth teams and up the technical side. In Paraguay, really, the problem is a lot on the athletic and the physical side, because you look at maybe our star player was in the end, Diego Gonzalez, who's going off to Lazio in Serie A on loan. He looked much bigger and much stronger than the rest of the Paraguayan players. And he has not been in Paraguay for about 3 years. And so that says a lot, right? That he went to Panama, he went to Peru, and he went to Mexico, and he's looking in better physical shape than the kids that are still in Paraguay, like your Diego Gomez and like your Mati Segovia and people. So I think that's really something important for Paraguay to think about and work on, about how are we going to, because now you don't really have, I mean, of course we still have positions in football, but every player is becoming more and more a complete player, right? When you look at the very top level, even to the point that goalkeepers are now much better with their feet than they were, say, 10 years ago. So the whole idea of this well-rounded development, and that players can really cover a lot of ground and play in different positions and be versatile. The two best teams in the Premier League are Arsenal and Man City, and they do that with inverted fullbacks and all this kind of thing. So, but to do that, you have to, the first thing is the physical side, right? You have to be able to cover that ground and be able to compete in the middle or on the wing. So you have someone like Segovia. I feel I'm picking on him, but he's very small, right? He's nicknamed the Mouse for a reason. But he's not going to be able to play down the middle in a big league because he's just not big enough. So he'll have to always be a wide player. And will there be a team that always wants a player that hugs the touchline? It depends. It's then a very refined taste and style for a particular team. So I really think there's a lot to do work on there. And that's maybe one of the starts. And then the other thing is, why are these players picked? Why are others not picked? What's the selection process? And a lot goes back to then the administration and how things are being run both at club level and at the national team. Are we really picking the very best players available, or are we picking those that are more favored by certain groups of people, right? Because that's something that's always been hanging over what they call formativas, what they call the young, the youth level, is that maybe, you get favorites because some people are managed by certain groups or certain people. And so they get more of a chance in the national team, which at the moment currently isn't working, right? Because they're not then able to bring the results that they need. So you feel like some kind of change is needed, but I really think that physical and athletic side is something where Paraguay have just dropped off maybe in the last 10 years or so, which is the last time they qualified for a World Cup was now 2013, and under 20s World Cup was 2013.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, Fede, where do we go from here, I guess, in terms of, obviously now the U17 qualifications are starting there, and Aldo Badia, who said, right there that we have failed after the failure to qualify. Where do we go from here?
Well, we definitely have to look at the way and just that they're working, the planning. I mean, this team had a lot of work in the field. I mean, they got together pretty much every week. I mean, they have no excuses to play the way that they played. Yeah, obviously from the point of view that Ralph was saying, the physical side of it and just the way that they train, and are these players really ready to play every 3 days just as a tournament or as a World Cup demands from you? Yeah, that's where I'm standing also, seeing that you need to work better on these players. You need to work better on the youth leagues, and you need to obligate the clubs to do that. That's why we had that under 19, under 20 rule on the first division. So the teams were pretty much obligated to put young players also on the pitch, because you have to obligate them to do a good job. And that doesn't speak well of the FA, of the Paraguayan football itself. We need to sell more young players. to the world. So these players are out there. And yeah, would this team have been better with Julio Enciso? Maybe yes. Yeah, obviously we would have been better with one of our stars, with one of our best players that was still part of this category. But he couldn't make it. I mean, the FA did not do the negotiations. They didn't do the work to have him in the Sudamericano. The team did not want to let him go. So those are maybe small things that you also have to do, Roberto. I mean, we don't have that many players to make up a list. So if you have a Julio Enciso out there, you need him on this team also if you want to make it to the World Cup. And that's part of the job also, from the front office. I think they should have done a better job to try to have that start with us, so he could have helped us get to the World Cup. Yeah, Argentina has a lot of players also in Europe. I think Brazil also had a couple of players that they couldn't make it to the national team, but we only have one, and he should have been with us.
Yeah, I think he should have. I think, obviously it shows as well how much Brighton really rate him as well. So, can't really blame him on that end as well. But it's poor from the administration, and we'll see what happens from here on out with what's going on. Just want to briefly close it out here, guys. On don't want to get too negative, obviously, of what we've spoken about, but let's talk about something a bit more positive. We'll talk about the women's game. Something that we always like to mention here at Guarani Vision. A big game happening this weekend, obviously, with qualification to the World Cup to Australia and New Zealand. The Paraguay national team are in New Zealand right now. They'll be taking on Chinese Taipei this weekend, this Saturday, actually. Well, Sunday over there in New Zealand, Saturday over here in the United States or Paraguay. A big game against Chinese Taipei. As we know, the winner of that game will take on the winner of Papua New Guinea and Panama. And the winner of that game next week, by the time hopefully that we can record another episode, we could hopefully celebrate Paraguay qualifying to their first ever World Cup. And Ralph, I mean, we need some sort of joy happening in Paraguayan football. It doesn't matter if it's men's or women's. I mean, this is the best opportunity Paraguay have ever had in their women's football history to qualify for their first ever World Cup. And I think people can feel confident, honestly. I mean, Chinese Taipei are a respectable side and very tough. We know. And you've had conversations with the coach, Marcelo Figueiredo, on what to expect. But just your assessment on really, and can they do it? Can they qualify for their first ever World Cup in their history?
Yeah, it's a big test. I mean, they got very close, remember, in the Copa America, because the way women's football, the qualification is through the Copa America in women's football. And they were very close. They had 2 chances. They had 2 games they could have won, the semi-final and then the 3rd, 4th place playoff. They lost both. One was to Brazil, so we were maybe expecting that. And I think the other was Argentina, if I remember rightly. So this is arguably an easier route to the final, to play to the World Cup, to playing Chinese Taipei and not playing Argentina, Brazil. But it's still a tough game. I mean, the preparation, so most of the team have been there for almost 2 weeks now. But I don't know if anybody's been following, but in New Zealand, they've had in Auckland, in the North Island, which is where they are, they had some disastrous flooding a few weeks just before they arrived. And then they had a cyclone that was on course to hit the North Island. So there was a pretty concerning. About a week ago, I was speaking with the people, members of the delegation. And so they would, they had to be sure, could they actually travel they were in Auckland and now they're in Hamilton where the game will be played. I mean, thankfully that's passed, and I saw some photos this morning. It looks very sunny. It looks good. The pitch looks in great condition. They were checking out the pitch, I think, last night. I get confused with all the time zones, but yeah, they've checked out the pitch. But then the other thing they have is, while most of the team came about 2 weeks ago, you have 8 players that only just joined up, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago, because they were playing with their clubs mostly in Europe. And that's, of course, with the European-based players, are the best players, and it includes the star, Jessica Martinez. And so they've only just arrived. So they're going to be playing this game almost still with a bit of jet lag and with some acclimatization needed. So that kind of throws in that extra curveball of difficulty, where you have the team from Chinese Taipei, of course, are coming from much closer geographically. So it's something that Frigerio is very aware of, and they've been working and talking to doctors and nutritionists and trying to find the best way to prepare for this game. But it is something to take into account. But I think they can do it. I mean, I'm confident. I think this is the best group of players Paraguay has ever had in the women's game, and it all comes from work that's been going on for a long time to lead up to this point. There's more games on TV, there's more professional contracts, there's now a high performance center, which we talked about in Paraguay. So things have gradually been getting better, and so it is a good team. Frigerio himself said it's the best team he's ever worked with, and he's already taken a team to the World Cup. He took Equatorial Guinea to their first World Cup in 2011. So positive. I'm positive they can get through this.
I'm totally happy about these games that are coming up. I mean, if there's a national team that I'm looking forward to making it to a World Cup, it's these girls. It's them. I think that they can do it. I've been under their wings for a while, and I've been watching them. I've been following their careers for these last couple of years, and you just seen the development in women's football in Paraguay. The TV even getting into broadcasting more and more games, and that's given them the exposure. We're seeing players that have grown also into really good players that made it to big leagues. So I think it all just comes together. It all just sums up to this game, right? Hopefully they know how to take this challenge. Hopefully they did everything just the way they needed to do to be ready for this game. It's just one game, and then you get a second game, but you got to get through this first match, obviously. And yeah, the jet lag is something is concerning me. It's something that's on my mind. I mean, it's not easy for the girls, for the body, for a professional athlete to just change their mind, just set that head, just 12, 24 hours maybe a difference. So it's not going to be easy for them to adjust to that situation. But that's something that China Taipei doesn't have, right? I mean, they're right there, so they're not going to suffer that for this first game. But there was a huge announcement also this week for the Women's League. I heard that the local league that's going to begin in April, the FA actually announced that all 133 games now of the year will be broadcasted by the channel. So we go from just watching one or two games during the week to watching all the games. And this is just huge. So I think these girls that are going to New Zealand, that are already there, that are getting ready for these games, I think they know that they're playing for not just making it to the World Cup, Roberto. I think they know that they're playing for something bigger for their country, and they're playing to make a name for themselves here in Paraguay. They're playing for the women's game here in Paraguay. So, and that represents a lot to them, and they could really put their names out there if they get the result. I mean, here in Paraguay, you talk to people and they don't even know that the women's team is probably going to play this weekend. But if they get the result, if they make it to the World Cup, I think they're going to catch people's attention. And hey, we just talked about it. We have not made a World Cup since 2013. The senior national team hasn't given us much lately. So if the women can pull this off, it's going to be huge for their game.
Yeah, it definitely will be. I mean, last thing from you guys, a simple question, and hopefully not a difficult answer. Ralph, I want to go to you first. Do Paraguay qualify for the World Cup?
Yes.
Fede?
Yes, we do.
I love that. I will give that anonymous vote and saying, yes, I do think they will also qualify for the first ever World Cup. And hopefully we can talk about this next week and be a bit more positive after what the national teams have been giving a bunch of negativity towards us in the last few years. So hopefully best of luck to them. Obviously we'll be watching and we'll be supporting them as always. And another way to close out another great episode of Guarani Vision for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah. Thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.